To my mind, if you only took away one thing from the hearing today, it was this next exchange between Jack Smith and a Vermont congresswoman named Becca Balint. It was an exchange about basically what it means to be Jack Smith right now in 2026, to have done the investigation that he did, to have found what he found, to have served your country by sticking to your guns, even when that meant the leader of the United States government and his party and his supporters would try to destroy you for it.
Trump has said that you, Mr. Smith, should be investigated and put in prison. He called you a disgrace to humanity, a radical left Marxist, a criminal. In fact, Trump has used the words deranged Jack Smith 185 times on Truth Social. How do you think that these statements have impacted you, your staff, and your investigation?
With respect to me, I think the statements are meant to intimidate me. I will not be intimidated. I think these statements are also made as a warning to others what will happen if they stand up. And I am, as I say, I'm not going to be intimidated. We did our work pursuant to department policy. We followed the facts and we followed the law, and that process resulted in proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed serious crimes. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen because he's threatening me.
And Mr. Smith, do you believe that President Trump's Department of Justice will find some way to indict you?
I believe that they will do everything in their power to do that because they've been ordered to by the president.
Jack Smith, I will not be intimidated. I'm not going to pretend those serious crimes didn't happen just because he's threatening me. As I said before, I will not be intimidated. Nicole Wallace, what did you take from this hearing today?
Well, what I took from my own reaction was that this was so extraordinary. But before Trump destroyed the Department of Justice, there were hundreds of Jack Smiths inside the Department of Justice. He was the archetype of the kind of person who chose that life instead of, being a partner at Paul Weiss and having multiple houses and occasionally flying private. I mean, this is what DOJ was made of. So what I thought about was how successful Trump's been in moving the Overton window, but I watched this with a lump in my throat, thinking about nostalgically about what the department was. The other thing I thought of was he is the most senior Justice Department official to defend what we kind of shorthand as rank and file. But the people that have been purged from the Justice Department were the best of the best. The most senior prosecutors, the most senior FBI agents who have been pilloried reputationally, threatened legally, face death threats by and large if they've been named and outed and smeared in the right-wing press. And they have hollowed out the Department of Justice. Merrick Garland hasn't defended those people. Lisa Monaco hasn't defended those people. Joe Biden hasn't defended those people. Today, Jack Smith, right after that clip you played, described the real danger and the threats and efforts to intimidate him to his team. And he really defended the integrity of the work they did. And I think some of what sinks in when you watch this is that we're all here today because this is extraordinary. We all know that this doesn't happen inside the Justice Department. No one says what he said today to the public in that Congress to Pam Bondi or Todd Blanche or Emil Bobe. And if they did, if Danielle Sassoon or Liz Oyer or any of those people did, they've been asked to leave.
That's right. Which is the dark and terrible side of the Justice Department professional ethic that says if you are asked to do something unprofessional or wrong, you resign. We have seen people resigning like whole forests of them falling all at once. And what it means is that the Justice Department, as you say, doesn't have those folks in it anymore.
That's right. And what is so, I think, painful about this is not that just Jack Smith's work that he did on behalf of not a president, not a party, but on behalf of the country. Yeah. He worked for the country. He was a taxpayer-funded prosecutor who came out of a different post to do this extraordinary job at a point in time when there was literally nothing to be gained. And as he stated at the end, he faces threats and harm, and he's all but certain he will be indicted. They will attempt to prosecute him because Donald Trump wants them to. That not only did he not succeed in bringing a case he knew he could prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury, but he will be punished for it.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I like Nicole, also felt like I was watching this human embodiment of all that's been lost and all that is crucial and central to really the entire functioning of American democracy, like this kind of a person who's a serious, smart, capable person devoted to public service who is doing their work without fear or favor, which they really want to destroy. I mean, they're quite explicit about that, right? They want to turn it into the U.S. government into basically Tammany Hall with nukes. They want a complete machine that's also like the global superpower where like everyone has a job because you gave Donald Trump some money or you know him, right? And this is like the ultimate rebuke to them.
And what you do with your job is serve the machine.
Yeah. Don't forget, Tammany Hall also tried to do some good things.
Yes, that's true. You're right. Actually, you are actually correct. That Tammany Hall is actually
We're in
superior.
Lauren's defense, Tammany
You are
Hall.
no. That is actually an important and good point.
Some like pothole filling.
No,
It
they
happens.
actually did do it.
Yeah.
The second thing, I mean, the other very lukewarm take I have is like, boy, it really, I mean, he was guilty as hell and it was a real mistake we elected him again. The final thing I thought was, just watching it, the sort of optics, take a step back, is like someone used this term that we're in the midst of a clicktatorship.
Yeah.
This sense that everything they're doing, the Trump administration, is spectacle, the sort of spectacle of menace, that when an ICE officer actually shoots and kills an American citizen in a car, he has to move the cell phone from his hand to the other hand so he could keep recording as he shoots her, because the generation of content is so important. Today we got reporting that when Charlie Kirk was killed, Kash Patel inside the FBI, the first thing he was concerned about was what he could tweet, and coordinating with Dan Bongino about what he could tweet, that he wanted to tweet pictures from Windsor Castle with his girlfriend that actually would expose MI5 agents. This is all New York Times Magazine today. This obsession with spectacle. And here's Jack Smith as like the ultimate opposite of that, right? Like a sober, solemn, serious person facing down this kind of carnival of absurdity that has now become, again, and that's always been part of politics. Hearings, as you will attest, right? They're always theatrical. Theatricality is part of politics. I have no problem with that. I talk for a living. But what is totally absent is any sense of seriousness or moral compass right now in the government we have. And here's this person who just feels like this like archaeological find from another era.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, the aesthetic of it, his asceticism, his stoicism, is itself part of the message. Ari.
Jack Smith's headline today was Donald Trump belongs in prison.
Yeah.
That he had the evidence, that the case was moving forward, that he could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Even Republicans seem to acknowledge that he is a strong and aggressive prosecutor, which is what prosecutors are supposed to be. Donald Trump belongs in prison. That's really something for the country to still see and hear from this person. Second, to echo others, Jack Smith is a sober guy in a drunk bar at 1 a.m. And he stands out more that way. And our job is to try to make sense of this. And you just presented some of those key highlights. People can take it in. People can go online later tonight, tomorrow, watch more. What I saw there on the scale of public servants was an especially sober, fair person. If someone was watching and they're super political and they wanted to see him spar and rebut every type of Republican question that was a little leading or a little over here, he didn't do that. Why did he do that? Because that's not who he is.
Yeah.
But they need to discredit him because even with the case closed, he still comes off very credible.
Right. Yes. And more of the case is going to come out if volume 2 of his report is unsealed by the court. And a lot of people argue that part of the reason this whole hearing might have happened today was to try to muddy him up before the country gets a whole new dose of information based on the evidence that he gathered.
Well, for me, whenever I'm watching congressional hearings, I mourn for the day when they actually used to work. So one thing that was on display was the decline and fall of the congressional hearing. We used to have hearings like this in which both sides were actually trying to find the truth. The Watergate hearings were the example of this. There was a certain slight amount of Republican defensiveness for Richard Nixon through the beginning of the Watergate hearings, but as the evidence mounted, members responded to the evidence.
Yes.
And what you saw today was this utterly nonsensical display that there's no amount of evidence that could ever be proof to any Republican on that committee of anything. And this is where Donald Trump is not to blame for Donald Trump. There could be no Donald Trump without those people. Those are the people, the Republicans in Congress. They are the people who gave this country Donald Trump. They are the people who decided we're not just going to tolerate him. We are going to try to become him. And so what you saw today were Donald Trump's best students in Trumpian lying. They just think they can go into a committee hearing and lie and lie and lie. And during our lifetimes, that was absolutely impossible. If you got caught in a hearing in the Senate or the House saying something that could be proved to be untrue during the hearing, which was hard before the internet, but if that could happen, that would be the end of that person on that committee. The chair would go to the speaker and say, we got to get him off of this. He can't be here for this. And so here we are. The enabling party of Donald Trump was on display today.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think that, back in the day, if you were like a kid who, played hooky from school to watch a congressional hearing, you could pretty much assume that kid someday was going to become a congressional staffer or run for Congress. Right. Like it was that kind of nerddom. Any kid watching this today is definitely never going to run for Congress. Yeah. This is like whatever the opposite of an advertisement is for whether this is a good line of work.
There's the famous Moynihan quote of, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. Yeah. He would say that in a Senate hearing approximately once a year, because he would be pushed to the point of saying that exactly once a year. That's how much we accepted the same facts and then argued off of the same facts in those days.
Today, for the first time, the American public sat in a congressional hearing room and watched a man who has been called a deranged animal, a criminal, a disgrace to humanity, and a radical left Marxist 185 times on Truth Social alone look the United States Congress directly in the eye and say, I will not be intimidated. I followed the facts. I followed the law. That process resulted in proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed serious crimes. And I am not going to pretend that did not happen just because he is threatening me. His name is Jack Smith. He is a career public servant who gave everything to a case he could not finish. And today he told Congress, and through them the American people, exactly what he found. Stay right here. Let me tell you what today's hearing actually was. Beneath all the noise and the Republican theatrics and the Jim Jordan performance and the Truth Social post, because I think it deserves to be named clearly and precisely for what it was, not just for what it felt like in the moment. Today was the day the American public got to hear in plain language under oath from a sober, serious, meticulous career prosecutor that the President of the United States committed crimes, serious crimes. Crimes that Smith said he could prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury of 12 ordinary Americans. Crimes involving the willful retention of national defense information under the Espionage Act, carrying up to 10 years per count. Crimes involving a criminal scheme to overturn a free and fair election and prevent the peaceful transfer of power. Smith said he had no regrets. He said he stood by every decision. He said the evidence required that Trump be held to account, and so that is what he did. And then he said something else, something that should be printed on the front page of every newspaper in this country tomorrow morning. He said that when Congresswoman Becca Balint asked him whether he believed Trump's Justice Department would find a way to indict him, his answer was not, I hope not, or I don't think so, or that would be unprecedented. His answer was, I believe they will do everything in their power to do that because they have been ordered to by the president. A former special counsel sitting before the United States Congress telling the American people that he fully expects to be criminally prosecuted by the man he prosecuted. Not because he did anything wrong, but because he did everything right. As Jamie Raskin put it, that is exactly the distinction. Trump wants Smith in prison not because Smith broke the law. Trump wants Smith in prison because Smith followed it. And what surrounds that testimony, what gives it its full and devastating weight, is exactly what Nicole Wallace described when she talked about watching with a lump in her throat. Jack Smith is not an anomaly. He was, as she put it, the archetype. Before this administration hollowed out the Department of Justice, before the purges and the resignations and the political litmus tests and the Pam Bondys and the Todd Blanches replaced the career prosecutors, there were hundreds of Jack Smiths inside that building. People who chose public service over partnership at a law firm. People who took the cases nobody else wanted, built them brick by brick according to the rules, and delivered results. The best of the best, and they are gone now. Fired, threatened, smeared, driven out, replaced by people whose first loyalty is not to the law or to the country or to the Constitution, but to one man. What you watched today was not just a hearing. It was an archaeological find, as one of the analysts put it, a relic from the America that existed before January 20th, 2025, a man who still acts as if the rule of law means something, who still behaves as though facts are facts and evidence is evidence, and no one, including the president, is above it, who sat in that chair today knowing full well that the retribution is coming and said, "I will not be intimidated." That is who Jack Smith is. That is what this country is losing, and that is what we are fighting to get back. Hit subscribe, keep fighting, because truth is golden.
In the U.S., the country is still reeling from the fallout of the Epstein files, which ensnared the world's elite, including CEOs, a former prince, and even President Trump. But despite millions of pages being released, an NPR investigation reveals the Justice Department withheld or removed a number of pages related to allegations involving the president. Stephen Fowler is the reporter who broke that story, and he tells Michelle Martin how he uncovered the discrepancies and what this suggests about the DOJ's handling of the files.
Thanks, Paula. Stephen Fowler, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you're NPR's lead on the Epstein files. You've been combing through, like 3 million different files, 3 million pages. There's no table of contents. There's no sort of order to it. But there's something that made you think there was something missing that you couldn't just attribute to over-redaction or confusion or disarray. So what was it?
There was this PowerPoint that the Justice Department put together in late July and August of last year about the Maxwell and Epstein cases. And in that PowerPoint was a slide that talked about prominent names. Atop the prominent names was President Trump. And under his name, there were 2 different women that had allegations or accusations that mentioned him. There was one that had a very salacious claim that said 4 decades ago, he sexually abused her when she was a minor. There was this second allegation from a woman who said when she was a teenager and accompanying Epstein on travel, she met Trump at his Mar-a-Lago club, and there were some remarks made about, isn't this a good one? And what stood out was that for the first claim, the claim that the President of the United States sexually abused a minor, there was only one other mention of that claim in all of the millions of Epstein files that we were able to look at. And it was part of a list of claims against the president that the FBI collected. They looked through these claims. Many of them were marked as unverifiable or not credible or, couldn't be tracked down. But this claim said that it was enough to be sent to a field office for further investigation. And doing a little bit more digging, we found that interview that took place, but there was no information about that claim against Trump, so there were a lot of missing pieces.
Ultimately, you figured out that the FBI had interviewed one of the complainants several times. How did you figure that out? Because those interviews are not in the file.
There are several sets of stamps on the bottom of all of these documents in the Epstein files. The most common is EFTA and then a multiple digit number. That's the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which is the law that President Trump signed to release the files. This tracking number is a sequential order of documents that are released. Now, this FBI interview with this woman who made this accusation had 3 stamps. There was another set of stamps that had a tracking number for non-testifying witness documents that were handed over in the criminal case for Ghislaine Maxwell. And then there was a second set of stamps in the middle. And looking at those numbers in order, you found as the bottom stamp increased by 1 to go to the next file, the top stamp increased by 6, suggesting that there were other documents there, and that middle stamp went up by 53. So you have these numbers that suggest there were multiple documents of multiple dozens of pages in the Justice Department's possession that were not made available to the American public.
And the law requires what? Does the law require that these documents be made available to the public?
There are a few exceptions. There are things that can be redacted and withheld to protect victims' personal information, and the redactions have been a little hit or miss that we've found. We've found victims' names that have been included and other information. The Justice Department has also taken down and republished things that fit that bill. At the same time, there are a few ways that documents could be withheld. The Justice Department says if it's a duplicate file through all of these cases, if it's something that is a privileged document of information dealing with their deliberative process and things, or if it's part of an ongoing federal investigation. And it's not clear that any one of those three withholding principles apply to any of these documents. We asked the Justice Department. They did not answer specifics about these documents or some of the other things that we found. So like many things with the Epstein files, Michelle, we just don't know.
And it is important to point out that being mentioned in these files does not mean that you engaged in wrongdoing or some criminal activity. But the fact that the FBI interviewed this witness multiple times suggests that they felt there was a reason to interview this witness multiple times. Do we have access to, or did you see any of those interviews?
The only interview that's in the files is the first of 4 interviews, and we know because there's an FBI case log called a serial report and this witness testimony document log that was handed over in the Maxwell case. We know that there were 4 conversations. We know that they took place over a several-month span. We know that the first one does not mention this specific salacious allegation against Donald Trump, and we know that the other 3 are not there. We have the beginnings of this story in the initial conversation and the tip that was called in. We have some semblance of the end of this story in that it made it into a Justice Department PowerPoint about the case, but there's so much missing in between that we just don't know. And to your point about being mentioned in the files, there are a number of incredibly salacious and incredibly untrue things about Donald Trump and others that are in the files, but they are in the files. They are released in their entirety, and you can read them and evaluate them and see that investigators didn't find anything there. This is the exception.
And so, needless to say, you asked the White House about this, and when you did, what did they say?
The White House has been pretty consistent in defending how they have handled the Epstein files and the calls to release the files and the law. A White House spokeswoman said that President Trump has been totally exonerated by the files and said that he has done more for Epstein survivors than anyone ever before him, pointing to the signing of this law that made things public, among other things. And so they are confident that how these files have been released and what they say is no sign of wrongdoing.
Okay, but what happened to those files? I mean, what are they saying about those specific files?
The White House doesn't answer. The White House has directed to the Justice Department. The Justice Department has not answered us, have not answered other media outlets that have asked, and they haven't answered members of Congress that are asking. The ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Robert Garcia, sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi asking for more answers because he ticked through those exceptions for the files to be made public. And he said, it doesn't appear to be a duplicate because you can't duplicate 0. He said it doesn't seem that there's anything privileged in these documents. So he asked the Attorney General to answer point blank if there is an ongoing federal investigation into the President of the United States. And we don't have those answers. But what we also have is Republican House Oversight Committee James Comer told reporters last week that he was looking into the reporting that NPR did, and he was still trying to get answers from the White House and Justice Department, too.
What are they going to do to follow up on this? I mean, do they at least credit your reporting that says that these files are indeed missing, that they are nowhere else to be found? Do they at least acknowledge that that is true?
Well, I have spoken with members of the House Oversight Committee on the Democratic side who have sent the letter and asked follow-up questions of the Attorney General outside of the Clintons' deposition testimony.